What's up guys, this is Nathan, ThatAlbumReviewerGuy, and I'm here with another episode of my series, Review Roundup. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this series, it features me giving my thoughts on albums that came out during the last 3 months that I wasn't able to make their own full-fledged review videos for. I'll be doing these in order of release date. One quick little plug first, I'm finally on Twitter now, at ThatAlbumReviewerGuy. The link is in the description with all my other social media pages, so feel free to follow me on Twitter. So, with all that out of the way, let's get on with this past quarter's review roundup. We're gonna kick things off with the new White Reaper album. I haven't heard of White Reaper before this year, but I fell in love with the lead single off this album, Might Be Right, so I was curious to see what else this album would have to offer. This is a cool garage, dance, and maybe even glam rock project. There are a lot of catchy hooks and danceable grooves on this album. I also like Tony Esposito's voice. He sort of has that Billy Corgan thing going on in the sense that his voice sounds a little nasally, but it's not really a turn-off. Musically, the album reminds me of the indie rock movement from the mid-2000s with bands such as The Killers, Arcade Fire, and Franz Ferdinand. There's nothing really bad about this record, but not every song is necessarily impactful. There are some solid jams on here though, like the aforementioned Might Be Right, 1F, and Real Long Time. This disc has a solid foundation and it builds off of it fairly well. Overall, I give You Deserve Love a 7.5 out of 10. I'm open to giving this album the occasional spin in the future, and maybe even bumping the score a little bit. Don't sleep on this album, folks. I bleached my hair for every time I could've died. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one, so let's get this over with. I'm not a religious person by any means. I went to Bible school a bit when I was a kid, but that's about as far as my religious beliefs go. While I'm not religious, I don't mind listening to Christian music every now and then, as long as it doesn't feel too preachy. Jesus is King does feel a bit preachy, but more pretentious than anything else. I mean the church choir, the blunt song titles, and just the overall presentation. Kanye has always been an interesting person, and all of a sudden he's this extremely religious man. I'm aware that he was Christian to begin with, but I also remember that he replaced every mention of God with his own name in the Book of Jesus, which I'm almost certain is blasphemy, but I guess the book was technically satire. Whatever, I don't want to start a debate on religion, but as for the music, it's bad. There are a lot of weird beats and effects, and there are a lot of irritating lyrics and vocals. I will say On God isn't half bad, it has a solid enough beat and rhythm behind it, and Closed on Sunday isn't terrible either, except for that god-awful Chick-fil-A line and whatever that bullshit was at the end. As a whole though, I highly recommend avoiding this album. Overall, I give Jesus is King a 3 out of 10. I'm aware that Kanye has another Christian album coming up, but I will be skipping that. I think I've had my fill of Christian Kanye. I'm not extremely familiar with the Norwegian prog band known as Leprous, but I've heard some of their prior material and I really enjoyed their style of progressive rock and metal. On this album though, they take things in a bit more of a progressive pop direction. Of course, there are still plenty of rock and maybe even a couple metal elements on the record, but it's different from anything else I've heard from the band. They even recruited a cellist, a violinist, and a classic choir for some sections of the disc. There's a lot going on here as far as the instrumentals go. There are some strange stylistic shifts, not just from track to track, but during some of the tracks as well. They can go from sounding bleak and depressing to triumphant yet menacing. In songs like Below, it's a little jarring yet still enjoyable. But in songs like the closer, The Sky is Red, there's a lot more progression and build to it. As for the vocals, well, I think Einar Solberg has a fantastic voice, and songs like the opening track, Below, and Alleviate do a great job at showing off his range. This is certainly an interesting listen, and it might not click at first, but there's plenty of talent and passion being shown on this project. There are a bit of lulls, and the inconsistencies in the style can take you out of it for a little while, at least that's what it does for me, but I still think it's at least worth giving a shot. Overall, I give Pitfalls a 7 out of 10. I wasn't really feeling this album on my first listen, but after I gave it another chance, I started to appreciate their change in sound more, and I actually like the album quite a bit now. Deliver me! I've only heard one Norma Jeane song prior to this album, so I went in mostly blind. They don't have a style of metalcore that's too out of the ordinary, at least not on this project, but I will say this album is absolutely brutal in places. There are a lot of crushing riffs, pounding drums, and awesome breakdowns. I also like Corey Brandon's vocal style. His screams are just vicious, and even his cleans have that raspy edge to them. Of course, this album does have some softer moments, like most of Kareen, but there are a lot of hard hitters on here, like Mind Over Mind, With Errors, and my personal favorite, Translational. Like I said before, this album doesn't do anything to reinvent the wheel, but it's still enjoyable for the most part. There are some small parts of the album that feel sluggish, and there is some overlap, but I'm liking this album. Overall, I give All Hail a 7.5 out of 10. Whether you're a fan of Norma Jeane or you're looking to get into this band, I don't think you'll be disappointed with this one. I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Soul Exchange Music for informing me about this release. OK Goodnight is a progressive rock and progressive metal band that is fronted by Casey Lee Williams, who is mainly known as the singer on the Ruby soundtrack. I enjoyed the music from that show, so I decided to check this album out, and it has quite a few enjoyable qualities. I like the way this album shifts between the softer and mellower instrumentals with both quieter guitars and beautiful piano to the more intense, harder guitar and drummer-driven tracks. I'd even say this album feels kind of cinematic in that regard, which isn't unheard of when it comes to prog, but I still enjoy that about Limbo. I also like Casey's voice on this disc. I'd even argue that she sounds better here than she does on the Ruby soundtrack, but that just might be a matter of personal preference. There aren't vocals on every track though, as there are some instrumental tracks, and not just interludes either, full-length instrumental songs, and they're not bad. Also, this album is only about 36 minutes long over the course of 9 tracks, so if you usually avoid prog because of the song and album lengths, that shouldn't be a factor. I'm not really blown away by anything on this release, but there's a lot that works here, and I'm hoping to see this band grow in the coming years. Overall, I give Limbo a 7 out of 10. Slightly off topic, but listening to this album reminds me that I really need to watch the new season of Ruby. I should stop putting that off. I've heard a few people praise Fire from the Gods here and there, so I figured I'd see what all the hype was about with this band. Apparently their first album was more of a metalcore release. This one is more of a nu metal, rap rock, reggae metal type of listen. There's a little bit of screaming on this album, but not a whole lot. I would describe their sound on this disc as Sevendust meets POD with maybe a little Skin Dread thrown in. I really enjoy the crunching guitars and blasting drums mixed with the hip-hop and reggae-influenced vocals, while still maintaining that harder rock edge. Songs like Truth to the Weak Not Built to Collapse and They Don't Like It, which actually features Sonny Sandoval of POD, are great showcases of this kind of sound. There are some moments that feel a bit simplistic and just kind of blend in with other songs and bands from the alternative metal genre, but for the most part, these guys show that they have their own style, and it's a very good and interesting style. I feel like this unique blending of genres really adds to the field of rock and metal bands who are doing pretty much the same thing, and it sets Fire from the Gods apart. While I do think the first half of this record is slightly stronger, I think the whole album is really good. Overall, I give American Sun an 8 out of 10. I can get on board with the Fire from the Gods hype train. This was a cool listen, and I encourage you guys to check it out if you're looking for rock and metal music that deviates a bit from the norm.
To get everything I wanted in this lifetime, I had to put my beliefs on the front line.
Who would have thought that leaving a record label and going back to being an independent artist would be such a great turnaround? Well, that's exactly what happened with Yelawolf this year. He was on Eminem's label Shady Records for his past few albums, and if you remember my review of TM3, you'll remember that I wasn't too keen on that record. It wasn't bad, but it certainly wasn't a strong effort. However, Ghetto Cowboy goes back to that country rap style that got me into Yelawolf in the first place. There are so many great songs on here, from the deep and moving So Long to the great flow on Country Rich featuring DJ Paul, to the incredibly catchy Opie Taylor. I love the fact that that song is about going back to the carefree days, as Opie Taylor was a very carefree child on the Andy Griffith Show, and there's a whistling part in the song that's reminiscent of the Andy Griffith Show theme song. It's just very cool. Lyrically, I love this album for the most part. There are some repetitive parts in quite a few songs actually, but I feel like it works. Even Yellow Wolf saying motherfucker at the end of pretty much every line on the title track doesn't bother me because I feel like it fits with the tone of the song and the subject matter of the lyrics. Instrumentally, this album's really good too. A lot of catchy beats and some nice country-influenced instrumentals that complement the tracks nicely. This is the kind of stuff that I've come to love from Yellow Wolf, and I'm glad that he's back where he wants to be and making great music like this. Overall, I give Ghetto Cowboy a 9 out of 10. It might not be perfect, but it's fantastic, and this album gets more enjoyable with each listen. Definitely look out for this one on the best of the year list. If the name Milky Chance doesn't ring a bell right away, take a second to listen to the song Stolen Dance. That's the big hit from this German indie folk group that came out in 2013, and it still gets a bit of airplay. They've released other fairly successful singles since then, but they haven't reached that same height. Mind the Moon is the band's third album, and while it still has that indie folk and folk rock sound to it, it leans into more reggae territory. There are several interesting features on this record, including one from Ladysmith Black Mambazo of all groups. Sonically, this album is solid enough. The vocals and instrumentals both sound light and calming. The reggae influences can be interesting in parts, but it's not something that fully connects with me personally. Also, there's nothing on this album that really jumps out at me. The music isn't bad, but it feels kind of plain. Overall, I give Mind the Moon a 6 out of 10. I wish I had more to say about it, but there's just really not a whole lot going on here. If you're the least bit curious though, at least check out one or two songs and see what you think. Finally, we have Duster's self-titled album. Duster broke up back in 2001, but they got back together last year, and this is their first album in 19 years. I'm not familiar with them, but I have stated in the past that I do like more atmospheric music, and that's what Duster are all about. They're an indie rock band with a bit of a space rock tone to their music. In the past, they recorded it on cheap and older equipment, and I'm not entirely sure if they did that with this album, but it kinda sounds like it in places. For example, the vocals are barely audible over the instruments in the mixing in some songs, like the opener, Copernicus Crater. While I think that helps you focus more on the music and adds a unique tone to the album, I can't help but feel like I'm missing out on a part of the songs because I can hardly make out the vocals. That being said, this is a cool listen. The guitar tones on this album are beautiful and dreamy, and when you can hear the vocals, they have this raw sounding edge to them that I enjoy. Unfortunately, I do get taken out of this disc a bit, and I'm not fully connecting with it, but this is some cool stuff, and even though I don't know the band all that well, it's nice to see Duster come back after such a long absence and put out a solid album. Overall, I give Duster a 7 out of 10. Whether you're familiar with this group or not, seek this one out if you're looking for some atmospheric and space rock sounding music. You might have some fun with it. Thank you guys for watching this review roundup. This has probably been the most positive one of these to date, which I think is pretty cool. I try to do these roughly every 3 months, but I do full-fledged album reviews more frequently, of course. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think about any of these albums. You can follow me on my social media links in the description, and check out some more videos and a gimmick on screen. I'll see you all next time.